X-Men, Nightmare's Dominion. When darkness falls asleep.
When darkness falls asleep, the X-Men's greatest fears awaken. The X-Men have faced many powerful foes, but Nightmare, ruler of the dream dimension, had usually been someone else's problem. Yet this time, Nightmare was slipping through the cracks between reality and illusion. Jean sensed it first, a subtle disturbance in the minds of the team, flickers of suppressed fears bleeding into their dreams, gaining momentum. It all began when the X-Men were summoned to Cerebro's chamber, where Professor X's usually composed expression was tight with concern. "My students," he said, eyes scanning them intently, "we're under attack, but not in a way you might expect." "What do you mean, Professor?" Cyclops asked, his usual determination shaded with unease. Professor X took a deep breath. "Our enemy doesn't seek to destroy us, but to possess us. In our sleep." As he spoke, the air grew colder, and the lights dimmed ever so slightly. A low chuckle echoed through the room. Suddenly, Nightmare materialized, his spectral form clothed in dark green robes with a smirk that twisted like smoke. His eyes shimmered with an eerie green light, dancing with the promise of twisted delights. "Sleep," he whispered, his voice a silken threat. What an exquisite vulnerability, don't you think? Without warning, the X-Men fell, their bodies hitting the ground like stones as their minds descended into Nightmare's domain. Cyclops found himself alone, standing on the cracked streets of a city in ruins. He called out, "John? Storm?" But his voice echoed unanswered. A shadowed figure moved through the rubble. It was a young boy, eyes wide with fear, clutching a toy plane. Cyclops' heart raced. "What happened here?" he asked the boy, kneeling down. "It's all your fault, Cyclops," the boy whispered, his face contorting into a grotesque version of Cyclops' own. "You let us down." He raised his hand, and in a flash, optic blasts erupted from his eyes, knocking Cyclops back. From the shadows, Nightmare laughed, savoring the twisted visions he was creating. "You heroes and your perfect ideals," he sneered, appearing before Cyclops. "But in here, you're all weak, vulnerable. And you, Cyclops, you're nothing without control." Meanwhile, Jean was trapped in a field of sunflowers, their faces turning towards her, whispering her name. "Help us, Jean! Save us!" they hissed, growing louder and more desperate. But when she reached out to touch one, it melted away, replaced by phoenix flames, consuming the field. She gasped, clutching her head. "No, not again. I'm in control!" she cried out, her voice breaking. Nightmare appeared before her, looming like a shadow. "Control?" he mocked. "That's just an illusion, my dear Jean." His hands extended, his fingers twining like serpents around her wrists. "Here, your fears rule you." Colossus, trapped in his own nightmare, found himself in the heart of Siberia, standing over his sister, Illyana, who lay lifeless at his feet. He fell to his knees, his metallic fists pounding the frozen earth. "Illyana, please." "I'm sorry," he choked, his words hanging in the frozen air. Nightmare materialized behind him. "You can lift 100 tons, but you can't protect the ones you love. Strength? Nothing but a prison, Piotr." He laughed as Colossus tried in vain to touch his sister, his fingers slipping through her as if she were a ghost. Meanwhile, Wolverine found himself surrounded by mirrors, each reflecting his past. 100 fractured versions of himself, each a different regret, a different failure. "Who am I?" he growled, his claws unsheathing with a metallic snick. Each mirror distorted, showing Logan's lost loves, the friends he couldn't save, the lives he couldn't reclaim. Nightmare's voice slithered around him. "Ah, Logan, your past is an endless well of torment. How many times have you tried to find yourself, only to lose everything that mattered?" Wolverine roared, slashing at the mirrors, but they only multiplied, each one mocking him with a different memory. Back in the real world, Professor X was locked in a silent battle against Nightmare's invasion. His mental defenses weakened, but unbroken. Nightmare. I will not let you enslave my X-Men. Nightmare's face appeared ghostly before Professor X. Then come and stop me, Charles, if you dare. The X-Men, one by one, struggled against their inner torments, but Jean managed to focus. Her voice reached the others through the psychic bond she shared with them. Everyone. Hold on, she whispered, her voice a faint thread of hope. We're stronger than this. Cyclops, his resolve hardening, stood up in his nightmare. You can't break us, Nightmare. We fight our fears every day. At those words, the shadows around them began to break apart, the illusions losing their hold. Nightmare's smirk faltered. No, this is my domain, he shouted, his form becoming frenzied, desperate. But Wolverine, now more lucid, sneered. Buddy, you picked the wrong team to mess with. Together, they shattered Nightmare's control, each pulling out of his twisted world. With one final scream of defiance, Nightmare dissipated, his power fading as the X-Men regained consciousness. In the silence that followed, they looked at each other, battered but undefeated. Professor X's voice cut through their shared relief. Well done, my X-Men. Remember, fear is only as powerful as we let it be. Cyclops nodded, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. Nightmare may be gone, but next time, we'll be ready. And somewhere in the dream dimension, Nightmare's voice lingered like a whisper.
I'll be waiting.
Check out how you can get comics and products that feature these and more. And hit the subscribe button to be a part of this exciting series.